Chapter 6. Milo wandered through the sprawling Victorian mansion. The rooms were filled with empty cages and exhibit placards for animals long extinct. The dodo, the passenger pigeon, and the crimson-clawed mountain hopper, whatever the hell that was. The placard featured a sketch that looked like something a medieval monk might have drawn after too much communion wine. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the polished hardwood floors. Milo walked over to the winding staircase and walked up. "Hello?" His voice echoed through the house. "Is anyone here?" Which was a strange question to ask, because Milo had no idea why he was here. In fact, he couldn't even remember arriving. He was just in the house, exploring the cavernous hallways. Why was there a portrait of Felix dressed as Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future on the wall? And empty rooms. But now a door creaked open at the end of the second-floor hallway. Milo hesitated. "Who's there?" No response. It would probably be a good idea to leave, but of course he didn't. He walked down to the open door and peered inside, half expecting to see Felix. Instead, he found a distinguished older gentleman seated in a high-backed red leather chair. His silver hair was neatly combed and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses were perched on his nose. Across from him was an identical red leather chair, this one empty, and a table resting between the two. On it sat a glass of water. "Ah, there you are," the man smiled. "I've been expecting you." Milo blinked in surprise. "Frank Capra?" The director looked down at himself. "Last I checked, come in, my boy. We have much to discuss." Milo entered the study and walked to the empty chair, then sat. "I don't understand. How did I get here?" "There is no here," Capra said. "What do you mean?" "This place is all in your head." "You mean I'm dreaming?" "I suppose, if that's what you want to call it." Capra shrugged. "It's your head." Milo scrunched his nose. Was he dreaming? It was certainly possible. He looked around the room. What is this place? Why, it's the Invisible Zoo, of course. Or perhaps it's the Golden Path. The lines between our two creations have become rather blurred, wouldn't you say? I guess. And then a menagerie of impossible creatures materialized around them. A dodo bird was perched on the back of Capra's chair. A woolly mammoth's trunk snaked through an open window and trumpeted. How was that even possible on the second floor? And something that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a vampire sat beside the fire. A crimson-clawed mountain hopper, perhaps? "Remarkable, isn't it?" Capra said. "The power of cinema to bring the impossible to life, to make the invisible suddenly visible, and ultimately change the world." Milo nodded. "That's why I wanted to make movies." "I know." Capra's expression grew serious. "But Milo, the stories we tell have consequences beyond what we can even imagine." "What do you mean?" Milo asked. The director stood and walked over to the window. The mammoth was gone, and it was now covered in a thick pane of glass. "Come, there's something you need to see." Milo got up and walked over. Outside were emerald hills, the grassy slopes dotted with the kind of technicolor wildflowers that wouldn't look amiss in The Wizard of Oz. The sky was so blue it hurt to look. A lake mirrored the heavens, its surface broken only by the occasional leap of a flying fish. At least Milo assumed it was one, though he had never seen one in canary yellow before. It was so pristine and untouched that Milo half expected to see a unicorn prance out from the tree line. "Is this a movie?" Milo asked. Capra looked at him with pity. "I told you before. It's in your head." "Right." Milo would have to watch his tongue, or else suffer his idol thinking him an idiot. And then a shadow fell across the terrain, pouring across the landscape like spilled ink, bleeding colour from everything it touched. A dark cloud bloomed on the horizon and expanded outward into that terrifying mushroom shape, the sky turning a sickly shade of orange. The flowers were decimated, the water vaporized, and the approaching shockwave was headed right for them. Milo recoiled. Capra placed a hand on his shoulder. "You must wake up, Milo." "But I'm not asleep," he said. "Wake up, Milo," Capra said, glancing outside. The shockwave was almost on them. "Before it's too late, wake up, or—" Milo's eyes flew open. Where the hell was he? Not in a Victorian mansion, that's for sure. He was sprawled over a desk, his heart hammering against his ribs. Cold sweat plastered his shirt to his back. His mind still half-trapped in that moment between dream logic and reality, where impossible animals and mushroom clouds felt as real as his desk. Lingering images clung to his mind, refusing to fully dissipate, even as the familiar office surroundings came into focus. "Well, ain't you the Sleeping Beauty?" Poppy loomed over him, holding a steaming cup of coffee in her perfectly manicured hand, crimson lips a perfect O as she set about blowing a bubble. He sat. A page of script stuck to his cheek with saliva. Milo peeled the paper from his face. "What time is it?" Poppy glanced at her watch and popped a bubble. "1:15. You look like hell." "Rough night?" Milo tried to run a hand through his hair but found a lump of something that felt suspiciously like hardened gum. How the heck had that gotten there? He was about to ask when Poppy deposited his cup of coffee, then grabbed a pair of scissors from her pen holder and started cutting out the chewed gum. "You could say that," Milo said, "but it was worth it. Because I've finally done it, Poppy. I've found our film." "And what would that be?" Milo leapt to his feet, narrowly avoiding the scissors which had finished alleviating the right side of his head of a large portion of hair. "I'm going to direct The Golden Path." Poppy arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "The what now?" "The Golden Path," Milo said, rifling through the papers on his desk. "It's a lost Capra masterpiece. An incredible story about a man who discovers a hidden path that allows him to travel through time and witness pivotal moments, forcing him to choose between observing and intervening in humanity's greatest triumphs and tragedies." "Sounds complicated," she said. No. It's the path that connects us with history and allows us to shape our future. There's this haunting scene where the protagonist meets his younger self and tries to warn him about— Never mind. Here, let me show you. Milo thrust a script page towards Poppy, impaling the sheet on one end of the scissors. His eyes widened. Thank God he'd photocopied the original. "How about I—" He plucked the page off, took the scissors and tossed them into his desk drawer. Poppy scanned the script. "This sounds an awful lot like The Invisible Zoo. Are you sure you didn't write this and slap Capra's name on the front?" "Nope, I got it from the studio archive." "We have an archive?" He nodded. She didn't look convinced. "The main character's name is the same." Milo slammed his palm on the desk with conviction. "All right, yes, there are similarities to The Invisible Zoo, but that's what makes this movie perfect. We're creating a cinematic bridge between past and present. Remaking a classic is like finding the missing link in film evolution." "I don't think that's quite how it works," Poppy said. "And if there's one thing I know, it's useless Hollywood trivia. I can name every dog that's ever played Lassie, so how come I've never heard a peep about this Golden Path script by Capra?" Milo opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I don't know, but it's a genuine lost film. Imagine the buzz we'll generate. Film students and cinephiles will be falling all over themselves to see a newly discovered classic, and the studio can't possibly say no to Capra, right? They said no to Star Wars, E.T., Back to the Future. Okay. Dirty Dancing, The Exorcist. I hear you. Pulp Fiction. I got it. Poppy snapped a bubble, then set the script down, gave him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder before returning to her desk. Milo slumped back into his chair, staring at his now cold coffee. The excitement that had fueled him last night was now evaporating in the face of a familiar despair, and Hollywood despair was the worst possible kind. He felt right back where he started, with no script, and a burgeoning resentment against George. Milo decided what he needed most was a fresh perspective and a hot cup of coffee. He got up and walked to the door, waving to Poppy. Then he headed to Ava's Airstream, hoping her eternally sunny disposition might rub off on him. "Well, if it isn't my favourite aspiring auteur," she said, greeting him with a grin. Although you look like you could use a pick-me-up. The usual? He nodded in gratitude. Make it a double. Hell, make it a triple. You want whiskey with that? He perked up. You can do that? Of course not. She turned to the espresso machine. Archive let you down? You could say that, Milo sighed. I found this amazing lost Capra script called The Golden Path. It's perfect. Everything I've been trying to do with the Invisible Zoo, but better. And that's a problem? Poppy thinks it's too similar. Harrington will reject it. Ava handed Milo his coffee, her brow furrowed in thought. Maybe you just need to flip the script. Milo took a sip of coffee. What do you mean? Why not use the prize money from your indie festival win to make the movie yourself? Milo's eyes widened, mouth opening and closing like a canary yellow flying fish out of water. The words rent money danced on the tip of his tongue, but Ava's suggestion had triggered a chain reaction in his brain. He slammed his palm on the counter, making her, and the coffee in his other hand, jump. Ava, you beautiful caffeinated genius! You've solved everything! Milo spun on his heel, but then pivoted. His cheeks reddened. He couldn't believe he was about to ask her this. Do you know Felix from the archive? I don't think so. What does he look like? Well, he's a red fox puppet, Milo said, realizing how ridiculous he sounded as the words left his mouth. A puppet? Her eyes widened slightly. Are you feeling okay, Milo? Maybe I should switch you to decaf before you start seeing talking teapots. Never mind, it's not important. Milo shook his head, lifting his cup. Thanks for the coffee, and the inspiration. Then he made his way back toward his office. Ava watched him go. Once he was out of sight, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. It's me, she said. He's seen Felix. Uh-huh. No, I'm not fucking kidding. I know it's been 37 years since he's appeared to anyone. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Understood. I'll keep an eye on him. She disconnected. And then a smile creased her lips, the kind that suggested she knew exactly which plot twist was coming next.